Hello there! I decided to make this video as some of my students needed to create datasets for their assignments. As it can be the issue of confidentiality to use the actual data from the companies they are working with or having an internship, they should create data by themselves. This can be easily achieved by Microsoft Excel, especially that several powerful functions became available in 2020. Those can be used in spilled array formulas. Well, after watching this video, you will be able to create your own datasets. For this video, I'm using Microsoft 365. Here is the example that I've created, and actually this is the dataset that I've used in my other videos. And that dataset was created by myself. Well, you will start with the assumptions. You will think about the company, about which you want to create raw data. Think about the department, products, KPIs you want to choose and visualize. In my example, I have several angles here for the dataset. The date column, the date angle is mandatory, and then you will create extra columns there if you want to separate year and month, for example. Then you will have the products, and the product names are here, the units sold, and which countries it is sold, which groups these products making part of, and you can add as many angles as you want. Well, let's go now how I created this one. I mentioned you start with the assumptions. Think about the company, give it a title, and then create the products. Or if you are using the current company you are working with, you already know the structure and the product names and so on. In my case, these were the assumptions. Well, if you want several years data, then you will start with the previous years. Like in my case, I have it from 2018, and then I say number of years that I want to have in my data set is 3. So I have the start date and the end date. You decide as well how many rows your data set will have. If I go to the table here and check the rows, it is visible here. It is 1500 rows and the title, so it is 1500, and it is here. If I want only 50 rows, and then I will go to my dataset creation page, I have it here. Right, let's go back, make it 1500. The next assumption that I make here is the minimum number of units and maximum number of units. You supply these numbers and then they go to your data set, like I have the units all here, and these are the randomized between my minimum and maximum. In the same way, you can use this randomization for the price as well. If you have the product names here, you can randomize the price. So possibilities are a lot, and the biggest advantage of this one is that they are completely dynamic. Whenever you change it here, if you decide my minimum unit should be 50, then it will be automatically updated here. I have other assumptions here as well, like the country. This is the list of the countries that I want sales to happen. And this is also randomized in my table. And another assumption is the product assortment. These are the unique numbers of my product assortment, and then they are related to the group. Well, let's start and create a dynamic dataset now based on these assumptions. For this dataset, I will use these functions. This is the list of functions. Well, sequence, RenderA, index and rows are from 2003, and then XLOOKUP is a new function as well, sequence and RenderA. And when I work with the functions, I will give the explanations as well, what are the syntaxes of these functions and how many arguments they take. Well, This is the dataset that I've created by using these functions. And these are the spilled array formulas. That means if you check it in the screen here, you see the expression. And this expression, this formula, only lives in the first column, first cell. If I check other cells in this column, they are gray. So only the valid function is on one cell, and that is so flexible. You enter the expression in one cell and you will get it in the column or columns. How efficient is that? Well, the dataset starts with creating the date. I have two ways here to create the date dataset, date column. In the first column, I'm using the function sequence, and in another column, I'm using the function RenderA. I will explain what are the differences and how you can make it. I will copy paste these ones next to this dataset that I created here, and you can follow me and later do it by yourself. The sequence function generates an array of sequential numbers. If you want your date column to follow the calendar and show the sequential numbers, then go for this option. You can see in this column that it starts from the 1st of January 2019, and that is the start date that I've supplied for this argument of this function. Or if you don't want in the sequential order, or it's not important, it's not more financial related data, and you just want the random data between the start date and then end date, then you can use the RenderA function to generate the date column. And both of the functions and how the formulas are done, they are spilled array formulas, and they spill down in the column. That means that the expression lives only in the first cell of the column, then it is spilled down through the column. I will use the sequence function now, and you can see how it works. Well, the sequence function takes 4 arguments. Let's start typing the sequence. It comes up here, and then you see the syntax of this function. And it takes 4 arguments. It has the rows, columns, and start, and the step. Well, actually, step is the optional, and start is the optional as well, and default are 1. But in my case, I will enter all the arguments there, and then it's under my control how it develops. The first column, rows, says how many rows you want to have in your dataset. And remember, in my assumptions, I have the column here where I say I want so many rows. So I will enter this cell here as the first argument. And whenever you change your mind, you want another amount of rows, you will change it here, and it will be changed in your dataset as well. The second one is the columns. For the date, I need only one column, so I can just enter comma there or enter 1 here. It's the same when you want only one column for that. The third argument is the start. So this is my start date here. So supply this cell, and the number 4 argument is it optional. If you want it to grow by 1 day, so you can keep it empty, and by default it takes 1. Or if you want bigger steps there, you will enter another number like 5, and then if it starts from the 1st January, the next step is in 5 days, and you will see it here now. Close parenthesis, hit enter, and here it is. Actually, don't be scared, this is not formatted as the date format yet. It is the number format, so it's an easy fix. Go here, go to the date and choose the short date, so it's the formatting issue. Well, when you see what you see here is it starts from the 1st of January, and because I supplied the step should be 5, the next day is the 6th, and then 11, and so on. If you change it like 15, the steps will be bigger. Or if you just keep it empty, remove this one, then the step is 1. So from the 1st of January it goes to the 2nd. But remember that we only enter the start date here. So if the start date is 1st of January and you want only 1500 rows, then you will not, you can estimate how many years data you have there. And based on your estimation, what you want your end date to be, you will choose the step here, and I will keep it 5. I already mentioned that you can randomize data by another function, that is RenderA. And this RenderA function I will use to randomize like units. And so you will learn in that way how to use this function. And in the same way, if you prefer it to use for the dates as well, you can use it for dates, like I have it here. The second column that I will create now for the data set is the units sold. And if you remember from the assumptions page, I have the minimum units and the maximum units. So I want this units sold range to fluctuate between this minimum and maximum. And let's use the RenderA function for that I mentioned that could be used for the randomizing date as well. Well, the Excel RenderA function is new, like a sequence function, and it came out last year, and that is available in Microsoft 365. This function generates an array of random numbers between. So you have the maximum and you have the minimum. So it will generate these random numbers between the supplied arguments. Let's start typing RenderA. There are other functions as well. They are older ones like rand between and rand, but I'm concentrating now for the spilled array functions, and I'm using the RenderA option. Well, double click on the function and you see the function syntax. And you can see that it takes 5 arguments. By the way, all the 5 arguments are the optional ones. So if you just keep it empty, it will take the default ones. But it's better to supply the arguments, then you are in control of the data that you will get there. So the first argument I will supply to RenderA is the rows. It's the same like the sequence function. I will go back to assumptions sheet and I will choose this cell there. The second argument is the columns. If you want one column, you can either enter 1 there or just skip it and enter the comma. Or if you want in several columns, you have several products there in the columns, then you can enter 2 or more and it will be split in columns as well. Just I will enter here 2 to show you how it works, and then I just want only one column and I will switch back to 1. The next argument is the minimum, and that is my minimum is here, that I want the unit sold to start. Then is the maximum one. And the last argument is the integer. You can choose here if you want it in decimals or if you want just the whole numbers. You can skip this one as well or just double click on the true. It's the same, and then you will get the whole numbers. And this is how it looks like when I entered that I wanted it to be split in 2 columns. It is in 2 columns. You can change it in more columns, like 5 as well. This is quite flexible, but in my case I want only in 1 column, so I will keep it in 1. This is what we did like for the numbers, And the same you can do for the date, like I have here, RenderA function, use it for the date, or use the sequence function for the date if you want sequential numbers. If you want the random numbers, then use the RenderA function. They are working with numbers, actually, like dates and numbers. But what if you want in your data set to have the text as well, like countries and product names and so on? How can you use the RenderA function then? Actually, the answer is you can't use it directly with the text because it works with numbers. However, you can combine it with other functions and still get the columns that you want. And I will show you how to do that. Like what I have here, I have the country, and this column is based on my assumptions from this one. And this is the table. I always work with tables, so it is much easier and dynamic then. Whenever I update it, it will get updated in the dataset, for example. So I randomize these countries. And for that, I've combined several functions. Like if you see from this expression, I'm using RenderA, but it is a nested function in the index. Well, index exists in Excel from 2003, and that is one of the most powerful Excel functions. It returns the value in a list based on a location. And index was quite popular like years ago as well, like the combination of the index and match to create the expressions instead of VLOOKUP, for example, that would be more dynamic. Then index and match was a preferable option rather than using only VLOOKUP. Index is a lookup function, and that is what it does. It looks up value from another array and puts it in your data set. And in this case, to randomize the countries, I will use the index function and then make it the spilled array function by using the RenderA inside the index as an argument. Well, I will start typing the index function, and you see the syntax of the index and how many arguments it takes. I will start with the array, and the array is that I want to return here. So I will go to my assumptions lookup table, and this is my array. This is a table, so with one click I just selected the array. Then the second argument you can see in the syntax here is the row number. But I'm not going to enter the row numbers here because I want to make this function a spilled array function. So in the second argument, I will enter this new spilled array function that is RenderA. In the RenderA, the first argument we already know, this is number of rows. So I will click on the same cell here. Skip the columns, just a comma if you want only in one column, or if you want more, then you will enter the number there. Minimum, I will enter 1. And for the maximum, I will use another function because I want to make it dynamic and dependent of this lookup table. So for that, I will use the function rows, and rows is an old function as well. Like it exists in Excel from 2003, like index, and mainly this function is used as an inside function for other ones. And what the rows does is gets the number of rows from the array or reference. And if you check this function, click on that, on the syntax, it takes only one argument, and that is array. And my array here that I want to be spilled there is this one, that I've chosen as an array for the index as well. So I will just select that array and close parentheses. Integer, I will keep it empty and automatically it will take the whole numbers. So I will close the parentheses for the RenderA and then close parentheses for this one. And you can see that I got the randomized countries in this column. So cool is that. And if you decide, no, this company is selling like products to other countries as well, let's make some space here. You can add US, for example, here, of other countries here. Let's add, do I have France? I have like Spain, for example, and the other countries. And because I'm working with the table here, whenever I enter new rows directly under the table or next to the table, they automatically become the part of the table and they automatically become part of the array that I'm using for the formula arguments. So when I go to the data set, I will see directly these countries that I've added there. So it is so dynamic. You just write the expression here, and then whenever you make changes, your data set is updated. Well, in the same way, you will randomize the product names, and that is what I did here. And I'm not going to show it again because it will work in the same way, like I will randomize the countries with the index, RenderA, and rows functions combination. And you can see this expression in this formula bar here. It is the same. The only difference is that array selection is different. Then I've used this one because I wanted to randomize number of products here. In that way, you can add other angles as well to your data set. If you want other departments and other products, or if you want to link salespeople to specific countries, then you can do it as well, either randomize, or in that case you can use the VLOOKUP function, because here I have this assortment in my assumptions, and then this assortment belongs to the product group. So actually I don't want to randomize the product group because I know that this chocolate name belongs to the milk product. So if I randomize that one as well, then it will be mixed up. So when you randomize the products, like I have here, then the product group related to that, you can just XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP, but I'm using the XLOOKUP function since it came out. It is much more dynamic and takes more arguments directly if I need. So you have the randomized product, then the grouping, you can use XLOOKUP function, and if you want to check how XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP is working, you can check another video from me that is dedicated to this topic. Well, this is how you can create your random data by yourself, so you don't have to disclose any confidential data from your company. And the final point is, don't forget to copy paste your created data set as the just paste values later when it's done. When you work on that and you check if numbers make sense, if your assumptions are correct, you just work in your worksheet and change the assumptions, add countries or delete countries, and make these decisions. And when you're happy with your final results, then just copy paste this as numbers. Otherwise, if you build your report on that data with these build array functions, they will change all the time and you don't want that. So for the final report, just copy and paste them as numbers, and this the first column, that should be the date. It takes the general format, but it is only like 2 clicks. Go to that option and then short date, and you have it. And then create a table quickly, and that is quite a good looking data set to build your reports there, to build pivot tables, pivot charts, and present it on a dashboard. If you want extra information about pivot charts and pivot charts tables, there is another video available for that. Well, about the randomized data, if every time this data, I should mention it as well, it changes, and like if you click on the F9, it gets randomized. So maybe you will use for one report assignment like different numbers from here, and then you can randomize and you can change them. That's why I said for your final report, just copy paste them as numbers, otherwise they will just get randomized and changed all the time. Now you should be able to design your own datasets by using build array formulas. Hope that the learning objective of this video is achieved. You can design your own datasets, they will be dynamic, and it's quite easy to create. This shows one more such a powerful tool Excel is to analyze data, especially if you take into account Power Pivot for Excel. Please let me know if this information helps with your projects. Write down below in comments your questions and if you would like information about other Excel functions.